Welcome to the Higher Ed Huddle, where we discuss the most relevant topics in higher ed today. I'm your host, Joe Traino, and I'm joined by Matt Bierman, Vice President of Business Affairs at Eastern Illinois University. Welcome, Matt. Glad you could be with me today. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Joe. I'm glad to participate.
Matt, today we'll talk about opportunities for institutions to collaborate and work more closely together. Before we begin, I think it would be good for you to tell us about yourself and what you've been up to lately, if you don't mind starting there.
Sure. So I've had the opportunity to work in higher ed for almost 24 years at three different institutions, both on the public and the private side. My career started in student affairs and has shifted in recent years. And the last half of my career has been on the business side. So I've seen higher ed from a couple different places. I even worked in the president's division for a brief stint, and have also spent some time working with state legislatures and in the state of Illinois. All of my experiences in the state of Illinois, and working to solve economic issues that have existed here for some time for higher ed. So I think I have a broad perspective of what we do, and hope that I can, in any way, through this conversation and others, be supportive of creative conversations and solutions as we try to navigate the rather difficult landscape that we find ourselves in higher ed across the U.S.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Matt. And I think with that broad perspective that you bring, I think really lends itself well to the conversation we're going to have today about opportunities for institutions to collaborate, not only in the state that you live in and work in, Illinois, but I think more broadly for higher education, considerations for institutions that potentially could collaborate more and really reap the benefits of doing that. Let's start with what are some of the services you feel would be of interest for maybe the Illinois schools to work together, and that can certainly be more broadly, thinking about other institutions in other states as well. But if you feel maybe focusing in on maybe your state, we could start there and certainly broaden out if we need to.
Yeah, I think there's opportunities in each aspect of higher ed. It depends on how much tolerance and how creative we really want to be. I think the easiest place to start this conversation is in the area of technology and IT. I think it lends itself best for some of that collaboration. I think right now in the state of Illinois, in the public side, our CIOs do meet very regularly and do a lot of meeting collaboration. I don't think that we are to the point where we've maximized the purchasing collaboration and using that. I think there's a lot of duplication of services in business functions and IT related to IT functions of business affairs, where I would love to see us be more collaborative and have a chance to impact the business models of higher education. There are plenty of examples out there where shared services of everything from payroll offices to cybersecurity types of initiatives. But you all have to have common terminology, common systems in some cases. And that's where it gets to be real challenging from a funding standpoint to make some of those shifts that will help you in the long term, but in the short term, it's really painful for universities.
Matt, do you think that this has to be driven from the top, or is there opportunity for a more of a grassroots approach? And you mentioned the CIOs meeting. Are there other approaches that could potentially increase the interest and I guess the partnering or collaborating more across these institutions? What do you think some of the challenges are there?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the first thing to consider, or the first thing that I would consider, is it's challenging because of egos. We all like our influence, or we like our control. So setting egos aside to say we need help is maybe the first thing we have to get past. And that may be at the presidential level. It may be at the CIO level. It may be at the VP level. It may be even lower than that in the organizational chart. So I do think there's opportunities for some grassroots stuff. I think if you can get that buy-in and get some small wins, it can grow. I think it organically grows really slow in that model. I think another approach is to go to the very top, and like in the state of Illinois, is to approach the state legislatures to ask for some assistance if we wanted to all get on the same type of systems that would allow for more collaboration. Because right now, you hit a wall of that collaboration because your systems don't talk. But if the state would support a model where we could still be independent institutions, but have collaborative software, collaborative systems, that allows for more collaboration, and I think ultimately savings for the universities. But it's a delicate model. If you read in the trade publications today that just came out, there was a lot of talk about, there was an article about University of Wisconsin system, and they're trying to do some consolidations. And this is a different version of consolidation. It's not consolidating institutions, but it's consolidating services. And it is delicate because some people are just against it, or they'll work against it because of whatever reason. For ego, they don't see the value. They think that their job is in jeopardy. They don't see the overall common goal or common good that could come out of it. I also think there's plenty of opportunities. And I remember, gosh, this has been a dozen years ago, reading an article about, I think it was schools in Missouri that had collaborated on shared services with bookstores, where their front ends were all different, but their back end purchasing was all done together. So they had scale in what they were purchasing. I think that's a model that could work at a lot of places, so that independent bookstores and folks who run things more independently can, instead of outsourcing to the Follett's of the world in that particular genre. So I'm optimistic that this will grow. I think in some cases, because of financial constraints, it will be forced. And in other situations, people will get together and start asking really critical questions about how we can move forward with this.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I like what you said about opportunities, that what there are as far as opportunities certainly can really benefit institutions. And I agree with you. I think certainly the egos of some leaders may get in the way of letting go, or this notion of losing control. I wonder, if the benefits outweigh those particular concerns. I'm wondering if there would be more of a movement in that direction. I'm thinking that some of the benefits certainly are, I think, from a resource standpoint, certainly the resources from a people standpoint, as well as costs or budgetary resources, such as software subscriptions, or in the example that you shared with the bookstore, there's certainly some economies of scale behind the scenes that can be realized. What are some benefits that you see aside from what we've just shared? Are there other benefits that you see that would be helpful for consideration as people think about a shared services model or some type of collaboration?
Yeah. So, I mean, and everybody always goes to economics first, and that's where I would go to. And I think there is some real economic benefits depending on the type of thing. But like in any of these, there's got to be a little bit of a loss leader in a couple of these, because you have to step back and look at the greater good as opposed to just maybe my institution. The one that comes to mind in terms of a benefit outside of economics is specifically in the area of cybersecurity or any business function of the university where it's important. You have to have eyes on it, but you don't have the budget or the wherewithal to be an expert, and you really don't want to outsource it because that expertise comes at a cost. So if you can find opportunities to collaborate on systems, on people, on processes that are identical or almost identical across institutions, you can share that expertise and get more bang and more coverage if you're talking about cyber or other things than you could if you're standing on your own or an island. Before I came to Eastern, I worked at a small private, and their ability to have scale on lots of things was really challenged. And I think we're going to see as the years progress here, the call for small privates or the prediction that small privates more and more are going to close. And I think a lot of that has to do with scale. And we've seen it in many industries. If you don't have scale, you get eaten up. And I think that's where we're at with higher ed. And nobody wants to look at it like that because we're all not for profits. But at the same time, if you don't have that scale, and that's not, again, just about economics, but it's about that scale of expertise and being able to provide that expertise for your campus for coverage. And you don't want to outsource it because you want some of it to be local, or you want to have more of an influence than just an outsourced model. I think that's another real benefit to this shared services approach with business functions and with specifically with the use of technology.
You see a requirement of a geographic proximity for these institutions. Do you think that's a barrier, or does it matter? Does it not matter?
I'd like to say it doesn't matter because technology can be ubiquitous across state lines, but I do think there would be some value in something that's more geographic, because I think it increases the opportunity for collaboration, for building trust, for common meetings that you can look across the table at somebody and know who they are, know what they're about, and trust that their interests and your interests align enough where you can trust, and that they're not trying to steal your students or whatever it would be. So I think it adds value if you have some geographic proximity to each other. I don't think it has to be that way. It has to be exclusive. In fact, some institutions have collaborated specifically against geography, and because they want to plant a flag in another area, but that's more about true institutional model collaboration as opposed to business function and shared services. So I think on the shared services side, it would be there is some value in doing that. And I think there's some other consortium models in shared services that have popped up that sort of play that out. That's where it's organically happened. I think there's one in the New England area. I think when I was at Illinois Wesleyan, we were having conversations with other small privates in the central part of Illinois because we were able to come together and begin to build those relationships. And without that, some of this falls apart. You got to be able to build those relationships. And I do think on the public side, it becomes a lot more challenging across state lines. It's because of the way we are funded and the influence of the state legislature, state compliance requirements, and those kind of things that are on public higher ed. I think it's not out of the realm of possibility, but there is a pretty significant challenge there.
Yeah. Are there any other challenges that you see outside of what you just shared?
I think the other challenge is just the sometimes fear of employees, understanding what's coming and what does this mean, and is the CFO just trying to shrink payroll? That I think that's a fear on behalf of employees. So, yeah, it's a hard one to come over.
I would agree, and I think a lot of times you see the the word consolidation being kind of tied to shared services, or at least um, some idea that maybe a shared services model means that things are going to be consolidated if people lose their jobs, when in fact it could be the opposite. So I think certainly as we look at potential opportunities for shared services, I think certainly there's a lot of benefits, and I think maybe from an educational standpoint, letting people see the benefits and understanding and learning more about what it truly means to operate in that collaborative model, and the benefits that can be reaped doing that type of engagement. Certainly, I think tells a really good story, and I think a lot of higher education institutions really struggle with understanding those benefits.
I think there is, we can get caught up in what's scary in this, and there are some scary things because it's unknown territory.
Yeah.
But I don't think we have to look very far to see that there's some real benefits. The irony for me is higher ed is you would think we were, real accepting of change, and in fact, it's a big ship and a small rudder, and we move slow and we don't love to change. But I think given where we're at with the industry, if you will, I think there's going to continue to be creative ideas that I'm excited to see what people come up with, and there will be benefits we haven't even considered as a part of that come out of this, and I hope that those are good for students. That would be the goal. Is my world is focused on business processes, business functions, facilities, and HR, but all of that supports what we do, and it's got to help students either financially to make their costs not go up as fast, or to help them be successful and persist to graduation as fast as they can. And so that's the lens we have to look at it. So protecting our networks and protecting our facilities and all that stuff has to play into that. And how can we do that in a model? The other piece that comes to mind is I have some searches recently, and some successful, some not, and trying to find people, is where do those shared services models help us when we can't find good talent? And we can collaborate to pay somebody a little bit more because we can't afford to do it on our own, and we can get better talent in that world of a shared services model. So we all chip in a little bit, and we might be able to get a little bit better quality candidate, or somebody who is more interested in locating in one area but still can support our particular institution.
Yeah, that's a really good example. Are there other models that you see that could potentially be of benefit to institutions looking maybe to dip their toes into a shared services model, but maybe not jumping in all the way?
I guess I live in such the business side of things, so I think that IT and business functions a little bit in facilities. And there are some of this that are happening. We belong to a consortium for purchasing. We belong to a consortium that buys utilities together with some of the other state universities. I think one of the keys to those relationships is like size and shared missions. Although we do some collaborating with the University of Illinois on our purchasing consortium, some of the other things we don't collaborate as much with them, just because their missions of research is much different than our mission of teaching. And that lends itself to be not at odds, but just different enough so finding like institutions, I think sometimes helps this be more successful than not. So that could be size, that could be mission. When we work with other schools that are much smaller, much larger than us, but similar missions, at least the regional public kind of world which is where we live. is helpful.
Yeah, I can appreciate that that perspective, and I wonder how much of having like-minded leaders thinking the same way of
Mm.
opportunities to advance their institutions, doing so in a collaborative way. Certainly see that as being a way to move the needle, if you will. But what you shared makes sense. Are there other opportunities that you see that institutions should consider related to shared services?
The one creative thing that I think will happen eventually is on the academic side. I think there's still opportunities for shared service. I don't even know if shared service is the right example, but it's shared curricular experiences. So if I can't offer a particular course because I can't find the right expert to teach that, I can't find an adjunct, then I cross collaborate with other institutions to purchase instruction. I think that world is coming. I think it breaks down walls real fast if we're willing to accept that. But we've got to get through some of the hurdles of the belief that nobody delivers instruction like we do on our campus. Excuse me. And so I don't think we're there yet. I mean, some institutions are doing that, but it's kind of few and far between. But I think that will become more and more the norm, especially in small majors, where if I would really like to offer a course in French or some other language or a particular genre of history that I don't have somebody on my campus who teaches that, I think there's an opportunity for some shared collaboration to locate and purchase seats in somebody else's course. So it's an opportunity for some campuses to be entrepreneurial and go do that. There are already some models out there. I'm forgetting the name. There's a school in Michigan that has started a program not quite like that, but similar, where you can buy instruction through them. If you belong to the consortium, you can sell instruction. So I do think those models are starting to pop up, and I think they'll become more common. So I think that's in other areas in academic affairs that we'll eventually get there. In many ways, we're not there yet, but I think we'll be forced to get there.
I can see more of an effort in the next few years, just based on the direction that we're seeing higher ed going in. Specifically the enrollment cliff, the tuition decline, and certainly state budgeting declining as well in some areas. It's going to be something that institutions have to pay attention to just from a survivability standpoint. And I like the idea of institutions being more open to being innovative and collaborating more. And I think it's going to happen. I'm curious what you think. Are you bullish on this topic, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think I am. I think I'm bullish on entrepreneurial and being creative. And I don't want people to think that I think all of this is transactional, because I think it's got to be more than transactional if it's going to work. And that's the nature of higher ed. We care about the people and care about the students. So it's got to go beyond that. But I think, I do think there will be a lot of further disruption in higher ed, but I'm optimistic that there will be some creative entrepreneurs that solve some of this for many institutions, or inspirational leaders who bring campuses together to collaborate more, so that more can survive, more can thrive in an environment where, as you said, the enrollment is declining and finances continue to be constrained. And I think part of that is educating the public on our business model is unlike any other business model. And everybody thinks we have these deep pockets because they see sticker price, and it's about net tuition revenue. And that's not what we talk about though in the public. And, unless we're going to get honest and have those conversations in the public sphere, we're also going to have to get honest about changing our business models and being more collaborative and creative.
I think that's very well said, Matt. This kind of concludes our time together today. Anything else, any parting words of wisdom that you'd like to share before we wrap up?
I think it's going to be a wild ride for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to need lots of partners. And that's not just in higher ed. And we didn't talk about collaborations outside of higher ed, but I think there's a lot of great things that have popped up across the country of people who are willing to help and see an opportunity to help higher ed. And I think we have to lean in certain situations on our outside partners as well, because they have the ability and the staff to do some of the research that we need to do to see if it actually will work. Will it save us money and those kind of things? So those are important voices in this conversation as well.
It'll be exciting to see. So I'm looking forward to the wild ride we have ahead of us. So thank you again for joining me today, Matt. Really appreciate it. And enjoyed hearing your perspective. And I'm sure our listeners will appreciate what you've shared and possibly consider some of the opportunities at their respective institutions and peers. You can find our podcast on SoundCloud, Google, and Apple. Check back next month for another great topic and a great guest. Until then, stay well.